really it was delving into the incredible ability of our mind, so our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions, to really shape our physiology and quite literally change the shape of our brains and the way that our minds and the way that our physiology is structured. And what he was saying was that there's no ways they would have been able to make the gains that they've made in the industry that he's in unless there was some kind of collaboration across industries. So not just approaching the challenge from a neuro point of view or a psychology point of view, but really combining that with biology and mathematics and all the different disciplines. And I think that's what's really exciting to me as a researcher now, is that here we are sitting in this room with a whole variety of disciplines. So world-class leading technology, incredible advances being made in mobile, behavioral economics, neuroscience, the whole space of mind sciences. And it's the combination and the integration of all of those that will really allow us to make advancements that we haven't really thought we would be able to make at the rate that we can make them. So it's really nice to kind of be on the same ship as all of you guys. My name's Shirley Wakefield. I'm from Pondering Panda, based in Cape Town, South Africa. And we are focused on emerging markets. In fact, the last couple of years, we've been going for 2 years now, has been really solely focused on honing our skills in the South African market. And the reason we've been focused on the South African market is because we've been in the fortunate position of having exclusive access to the Mixed social network, which is the second biggest social network in South Africa. It's got 6.5 million highly active users. And what this has meant is that in just under 2 years, we've managed to complete almost 5 million interviews. And every day we speak to anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 young people across the country on a variety of topics. And our focus, the Mixed Social Network, is sort of under 35-year-olds. So everything that I'll take you through today from an insight point of view is focused on the sort of youth market, if you will. And we've touched on it a number of times today, but mobiles have allowed us as researchers to get into places that we've never been able to get into before, from a geographical point of view, from a dispersion point of view. It's just too difficult. Certainly from a mobile research point of view, it's leapfrogged online research in South Africa because simply not enough people have access to online. So at the moment, when we look at the South African market, one of our big challenges that remain for us as researchers is that feature phones, as Yanni mentioned earlier, still very much dominate. For a country like South Africa, where there's a very high mobile penetration, some people say it's over 100% with dual SIM taken into consideration. There's still only about, very difficult to measure, but about 21% of those phones are smartphones. So it really raises an interesting challenge for us as researchers. How do we engage with respondents in a way that's engaging and interesting for the respondents, at the same time extracting insights that are really of value to our clients? And that's where Mixed has been fantastic for us as a starting point and as a playground, because Mixed is purpose-built to be data light. So it means that all interaction on Mixed for the user, you need a basic WAP-enabled phone, so it means we have access to about 2/3 of the market, is incredibly cheap for users to use. It's kind of like I describe it as a feature phone, as an app store for non-smartphones. So you can go download Mixed, and then a phone that traditionally was only really good for making calls and sending SMSs, because it was just simply too expensive from a data point of view to browse online. Now all of a sudden you can download Wikipedia, you can read books on your phone, you can access Facebook or Twitter from Mixed, you can get relationship advice, you can access your curriculum via Mixed if you're a school pupil. And what that means for us from a research point of view is that it's opened up a really fantastic space for us to engage with young people at a very low cost, but in a relatively far richer way than if we were engaging with them via SMS or USSD. Now, part of what we love at Pondering Panda is research into research. We're a fairly curious bunch. I was having breakfast with Mick this morning, and he said the synonym for curious is really nosy, so perhaps you could call us a nosy bunch of pandas. But research into research is really very central to the way that we work. And why it's that is that no one's really, that we can see, really cracking research in emerging markets. And that's our focus. How do we take survey design and research design to new levels within the challenging framework of working in emerging markets? Now, the fantastic thing with having Mixit as that initial playground is because we get really big sample sizes. So on any given survey that we're running, every 24 hours, we receive anywhere between 1,000 and 3,000 completed interviews. And it means that we can very quickly think of a question, put it into fields, get the results the following day with a sample that's big enough to delve right into and explore the sub-bases. Now, a part of what we've been interested in for a while now is mood. Our interest started with a fascination with mood congruence, which, as I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of, is the theory around I'm far more likely to be receptive to a message, an advert, or any kind of branded communication that is congruent with my mood. Now, understanding that space clearly has a lot of implications for the advertising world as well as the media targeting space. So that's where it kind of started. And then we said, well, hang on a second, if we're going to understand mood, we've got to understand how to research mood, but specifically how to research mood using mobile phones, and more specifically using non-smartphones, where we don't have the luxury of all sorts of rich media. And we also thought, let's have a look at, what are some of those influences that are driving mood? Is it my demographic structure? Is it the time of day or day of week? And are there a number of things that are influencing mood on an ongoing basis? And that's really what I'm going to focus on today. Just quickly run you through a couple of insights that have come through from our research into mood influences. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a bit of an understanding of what mood young South Africans are in. Is it intelligence? Is my self-perception of who I am, the weight that I am, the exercise that I do, how smart I am? Does that influence my mood? The weather, money. And then also very importantly, what about research itself? To what extent is the fact that we're engaging with young people in the moment on their mobile phones, to what extent is that impacting their mood and the way that they engage with us? Now, of course, there's a hell of a lot of mood research out there. And there's a tremendous amount of, or varying amount of designs and loads of different types of mood descriptors. So we've played around with a whole number of them. But what we found to be the best way of starting out with just establishing what is our mood descriptor list, we thought we'd just ask young people across the country. So we spoke to tens of thousands of young South Africans over an extended period. We just said simply, what in one word is your mood? So we thought we'd get a list fairly simply, something like this, which is fairly consistent with a lot of the global work that's going on there. But there was one glaring omission, apparently, which we hadn't considered. And apparently being in love is very much a mood. And God forbid we leave that out of the list. In fact, from a norm point of view, it normally sits in first or second place among those mood descriptors. So we thought we'd put this to the test, and we said, let's map this out according to national mood for under 35-year-olds in South Africa and get a sense of what mood people are in. Now, as it turns out, the younger you are, the far more likely you are to have feelings of being in love. 13 to 17-year-olds are most likely to be feeling in love. Slightly concerningly for parents of adolescents in South Africa, those most likely to be in love are also most likely to be bored. So make of it what you will. When you get down to 25 to 34-year-olds, 34 years of age, your chances or your tendency to feel in love plummets significantly. and quickly. Hopefully it doesn't stay down there for the rest of our lives. When we look at it from a gender point of view, males seem to be doing okay in a fairly neutral and happy space. Unfortunately, females skew significantly sad and stressed. And from a racial point of view, colored and black respondents far more likely to be happy and neutral, whereas white respondents far more likely to be sad or stressed. When we were sort of plotting this in the office, there were a few giggles that emerged as this chart came together. And I kind of got a few sympathetic slaps on the back because I happen to be white, female, and in 25 to 34-year-old age bracket, which makes me highly stressed and not very likely to be in love. We then looked at intelligence, but more specifically, my self-perception of my intelligence. So how do I rate myself relative to my peers? Above average, average, or below average? And of course, we thought that there would be a tendency for people to overclaim here. Of course, I'm above average when it comes to intelligence. And interestingly, 44% of the sample came back saying we below average intelligence, which is something we'd like to explore further. But certainly, the results did roughly mirror that of the IQ bell curve. We then saw that as one got older, so they were more likely or less likely to think that they were above average when it came to intelligence. Perhaps that's the whole sort of notion of knowing what you don't know as you progress through life. And interestingly, from a racial point of view, black respondents were far more likely than white respondents in South Africa to rate themselves as below average intelligence. Now, we haven't delved into this much. It could be a global phenomenon, but certainly it probably goes hand in hand with the South African historical context. We then looked at mapping this, my self-perception of my mood, my intelligence with moods. Is there a correlation and is it influencing my mood? And as it turns out, there is a correlation. So people that rate themselves highly from an intelligence point of view also tend to be happier. Now, this could be a spurious correlation in that if I rate myself highly intelligent, I'm probably more likely to be confident and then potentially more likely to be happy. But either way, there is a correlation there. We also found that this group wasn't all roses for them, were far more likely to be stressed as well. When it came to those saying that they were below average intelligence, there was a correlation with being more likely to be sad. And then average intelligence, as one might expect, was correlated with feelings of boredom or a neutral sort of positioning from a mood point of view. We then said, what about optimism levels? Does mood correlate with how optimistic I am about my future in the country? Now, the Youth Hope Index tracks optimism levels in South Africa on an ongoing basis and looks at what some of the influences are and what's worrying young people about their future in the country. And we said, is there a correlation between this and mood? And yes, whilst they were both stable on a macro aggregated level, there were fluctuations that were mostly correlated from a micro point of view. For example, when we experience, if any of you might have heard of the Marikana disaster last year, which really shook our country, there was a momentary dip in optimism levels, but they do sort of spring back quite quickly from an aggregated point of view, and we see the same trend with mood. Very interestingly though, the simple act of asking people to think about their future did influence their mood. So as soon as we engage with young people to talk to them and ask them to think about how they're feeling about their future, their stress levels rose. And whether or not this is an element of system 2 effect kicking in, I'm becoming more rational, I'm thinking cognitively now, whether or not that's more likely to be the correlation, we'd like to explore that a bit more. And then just sort of finishing up with a case study between with UNICEF and our Department of Basic Education. We've had major issues with education in South Africa, and in fact we're in a bit of an education crisis at the moment. with young people facing a lot of challenges when it comes to optimizing their chances as they progress through the education system. And UNICEF have partnered with the Department of Basic Education to try and crack this, to try and understand what the real issues are, and then try and provide and implement some solutions. So they've brought us in to help them track from a learner point of view what some of the issues are. Now, of course, they've got all the pass and fail rates and all of the national data that's coming out from the education system. But this is specifically to engage with young people across the country that are in school and engaging with the education system right now to get a sense of what's really concerning them. And we've integrated mood into this index. Just to share some of the findings with you. As learners progressed through the ages, consistently with earlier findings, we saw that their happiness decreased and stress levels increased. Similarly, there was a correlation between a learner's happiness and their confidence in how prepared they feel for exams. So as they feel more and more prepared for exams, so their happiness levels increase, and as they feel less prepared for exams, so their stress levels increase. Now, one might ask, what are the implications of this kind of thing? We're really looking at what are some of the, not only the direct factors affecting learners in the country. So do you have the right textbooks? What are the quality of teachers at your school? Does mood correlate with how optimistic I am about my future in the country? Now, the Youth Hope Index tracks optimism levels in South Africa on an ongoing basis and looks at what some of the influences are and what's worrying young people about their future in the country. And we said, is there a correlation between this and mood? And yes, whilst they were both stable on a macro aggregated level, there were fluctuations that were mostly correlated from a micro point of view. For example, when we experience, if any of you might have heard of the Marikana disaster last year, which really shook our country, there was a momentary dip in optimism levels, but they do sort of spring back quite quickly from an aggregated point of view, and we see the same trend with mood. Very interestingly though, the simple act of asking people to think about their future did influence their mood. So as soon as we engage with young people to talk to them and ask them to think about how they're feeling about their future, their stress levels rose. And whether or not to the learner's mood, again, was there a System 1 and System 2 effect if we engaged with them at the beginning of a survey? Or to the learner's mood, again, was there a System 1 and System 2 effect if we engaged with them at the beginning of a survey or at the end of a survey? Particularly when we spoke about topics that were slightly stressful, like how prepared you are for exams, and definitely we saw that System 2 effect kicking in there. So what we've been able to do with this data is engage with UNICEF and the Department of Education to really look at a very clear action plan around how they can use this information to assist young people to progress through the schooling system more effectively. And one of the things that they are doing and launching quite soon is a virtual school where young people can engage with their full curriculum via their mobile phones, via their feature phones on Mixit. They can download their curriculums across all their different subjects. They've got calendars there. They've got periodic tables if they need, if they're studying science, all sorts of different materials. For those learners that don't have tutors or somebody to help them with their homework, they've matched them up with kids at schools that have got this kind of support and can provide some kind of mentorship and guidance and helping with homework across different subjects. So just a practical way that they're using the information. So just to finish off, mobile data collection has been a fantastic tool for us in emerging markets. It's meant, we've mentioned it a number of times today, that we can get in the moment tracking of mood and emotion across the age spectrum and demographic spectrum. There are a couple of areas to look out for when you are exploring mood and researching mood, and that is question sequence. The sequence of your question. and the context of your questionnaire is absolutely vital to how a respondent will report on their mood. Order bias is huge. If you are going to be speaking to people about their mood, you need to rotate that list of mood descriptors very often to make sure that you eliminate order bias. Time of day, we do see fluctuations from a time of day point of view, but on an aggregated level, it balances out. Surveys are between 20 seconds and 2 minutes, absolutely max. They need to be sweet, they need to be fun, and they need to be gamified. So in as much as you can, you need to create a game out of your engagement so that people keep coming back to interact with you. Thank you.